She came home from her work trip weak and shaking, and I drove her to the hospital without questions. She didn't know the doctor was her lover's wife. Julia stumbled through our front door Monday evening, looking like death warmed over. Usually she'd bounce in from these business trips, energetic and chattering about meetings and hotel amenities. Not tonight. Her face was pale as printer paper, and she was trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. Jesus, Jules, what's wrong? I dropped my beer and caught her elbow as she swayed. I feel awful, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Really awful, Evan. I'd never seen her like this. In 12 years of marriage, Julia Bradford was the picture of health. She jogged 3 miles every morning, took her vitamins religiously, and hadn't called in sick to her HR director job at Morrison Industries in 2 years. What kind of awful? Flu awful or food poisoning awful? I don't know. Fever, chills, everything hurts. She leaned against the doorframe, and I could feel the heat radiating off her skin. My stomach feels like someone's stabbing me with a rusty knife. I didn't hesitate. We're going to the hospital, now. Evan, I just need to sleep. No arguments. You look like you're about to collapse. I grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door and helped her to the car. She didn't fight me, which scared me more than anything. Julia never gave up control without a battle. The drive to Mercy General took 15 minutes through our quiet suburban streets. Julia sat hunched in the passenger seat, shivering despite the warm September evening. I kept glancing over, watching her face scrunch up in pain every time we hit a bump. Thank you, she whispered as I pulled into the emergency room parking lot, for taking care of me. There was something in her voice. Guilt, maybe? But I was too worried to analyze it. I just wanted someone to tell me my wife wasn't dying. The ER was surprisingly quiet for a Monday night. The check-in nurse, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes, took Julia's vitals immediately. Fever's 103.2, she announced, wrapping up the thermometer. Blood pressure's elevated too. Let's get you seen right away, honey. They put us in a small examination room with beige walls and the smell of industrial disinfectant. Julia curled up on the paper-covered table while I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, scrolling through my phone and trying not to think about worst-case scenarios. Mrs. Bradford? A doctor appeared in the doorway, mid-30s, Asian American, with short black hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Her name tag read, Dr. Sarah Kim, Internal Medicine. Julia's reaction was immediate and strange. She went rigid, her eyes widening like she'd seen a ghost. Then she seemed to force herself to relax, putting on a smile that looked painted on. Yes, that's me, Julia said, her voice artificially bright. Dr. Kim stepped into the room with professional efficiency. I'm Dr. Kim. Can you describe your symptoms for me? Julia's hands were shaking as she spoke. Fever, chills, abdominal pain. It started yesterday on my flight home from Chicago. Business trip. Any nausea or vomiting? Some nausea, yes. Dr. Kim made notes on her tablet. Any recent changes in your routine? New foods, medications, activities? No, nothing. Julia's voice cracked slightly. Just the usual work travel. I see you were in Chicago for a week. Did you eat at any new restaurants? Stay somewhere different than usual? Same hotel as always. The Marriott downtown? Julia was fidgeting with her wedding ring, spinning it around her finger. I ate at the hotel restaurant, mostly. Dr. Kim nodded, then looked at me. Mr. Bradford, I'd like to examine your wife privately, if you don't mind waiting outside. Of course. I squeezed Julia's hand. I'll be right out there, okay? She nodded, but wouldn't meet my eyes. I spent the next 20 minutes pacing the waiting room, checking my phone, and drinking terrible coffee from a vending machine. Through the thin walls, I could hear the murmur of voices, but couldn't make out words. When Dr. Kim finally called me back in, Julia was sitting up straighter, but her face was flushed and she still wouldn't look at me. I'd like to run some blood tests, Dr. Kim said, her tone carefully neutral. Given the symptoms and the fever, we need to check for various infections. What kind of infections? I asked. Bacterial, viral, possibly others. We'll do a comprehensive panel to be thorough. Julia spoke up quickly. Is that really necessary? I'm sure it's just the flu or something. Dr. Kim fixed her with a steady stare. Mrs. Bradford, with your symptoms, it's important we rule out all possibilities. The tests will help us determine the best treatment. Something passed between them, a look I couldn't interpret. Julia seemed to shrink into herself. How long for results? I asked. About 2 hours for the basic panel. Some tests may take longer. A nurse came in to draw blood while Dr. Kim stepped out. Julia winced as the needle went in, and I held her other hand, feeling helpless. It's going to be okay, I told her. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it. She started crying then, quiet tears that she tried to hide by turning away. Hey, what's wrong? Besides being sick, I mean. Nothing, I'm just scared. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What if it's something serious? Then we'll handle it together. We always do. The waiting was the worst part. We sat in that sterile room while Julia dozed fitfully and I watched cable news with the sound off. Every time footsteps passed in the hallway, I looked up, hoping it was Dr. Kim with answers. Finally, at nearly midnight, she returned. Her expression was unreadable as she sat down across from us. The results show you have a bacterial infection, she said, looking directly at Julia. Specifically, chlamydia. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Chlamydia? That's an STD, right? Yes, it is. Dr. Kim's voice was steady, professional. It's a sexually transmitted infection. But that's impossible. I looked between the doctor and my wife. We've been married 12 years. We're monogamous. Julia had gone white as a sheet. Her hands were trembling violently now. Dr. Kim continued, the infection is recent, contracted within the past few weeks based on the progression of symptoms. There has to be a mistake. I felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and strange. Run the test again. Mr. Bradford, these tests are very accurate, and there's something else. Dr. Kim pulled out her phone, swiped to a photo, and showed it to me. This is my husband, David Kim. I stared at the screen. The man in the photo was familiar. Tall, dark hair, easy smile. I'd seen him at Julia's company events. That's David from Morrison Industries, Julia's coworker. Yes, Dr. Kim's voice had turned ice cold. He gave your wife chlamydia. He also gave it to me. The room started spinning. Julia was making small choking sounds like she couldn't breathe. Julia? I turned to her, desperate for her to deny it, to explain how this was all a terrible mistake. She couldn't speak. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Kim continued with clinical precision. I became suspicious when I tested positive for chlamydia 3 weeks ago. David eventually admitted to having an affair with a coworker. When I saw your wife's name on tonight's patient list, I put the pieces together. She pulled out a manila folder from her coat. I've been documenting everything since I found out. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages. David was quite careless with his phone. She handed me the folder. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were printouts of text messages, photos, hotel bills, all the evidence of my wife's double life, organized with the thoroughness of someone who understood the value of documentation. Your business trips to Chicago, I said slowly, looking at Julia. You were meeting him. She nodded, sobbing openly now. For how long? 6 months, Dr. Kim answered when Julia couldn't. According to the evidence I've gathered. I closed the folder, feeling numb. Why are you telling me this? Why are you helping me? Dr. Kim's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing raw pain underneath. Because I know what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trust completely. And because you deserve to know the truth. She stood up, smoothing her white coat. I'll prescribe antibiotics for both of you. The infection is easily treatable. As for the rest, she gestured to the folder in my hands. That's between you and your wife. Julia finally found her voice. Sarah, please. Dr. Kim, she corrected sharply, and we have nothing to discuss. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I suggest you and your husband have a long conversation about your future. She left us alone in that sterile room with the weight of 12 years of marriage crashing down around us. The drive home was 20 minutes of pure hell. Julia tried to talk, to explain, to justify what she'd done, but I couldn't process any of it. Every word felt like another knife twist. Evan, please, Let me explain. Explain what? How you've been screwing your coworker for 6 months. How you've been lying to my face every time you kissed me goodbye for another business trip. It wasn't supposed to happen. It started as friendship, and then what? You accidentally fell into bed with him? Repeatedly? In Chicago hotels that I helped pay for? She was crying again, but I felt nothing. The numbness was spreading through my chest like frost. I never meant for you to get hurt. I was going to end it. When? After you gave me an STD too? After you destroyed our marriage completely? I love you, Evan. I know that sounds crazy now, but I do. David was he was exciting, different. But you're my husband. You're my life. I pulled into our driveway and sat there with the engine running, staring at our house. We'd bought it 5 years ago. A modest colonial with blue shutters and a small front garden that Julia tended obsessively. It had been our dream house. Now, it felt like a mausoleum. Different how? I asked, my voice flat. What? You said he was different. Different how? Julia wiped her nose with a tissue. Evan, don't do this to yourself. Answer me. She was quiet for a long moment. He's adventurous, spontaneous. He made me feel young again. And I don't? That's not what I meant. But it's what you felt. Otherwise, you wouldn't have needed him. I turned off the engine and got out of the car. Julia followed me to the front door, still trying to explain herself, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about all the signs I'd missed, the new lingerie, the extra attention to her appearance before business trips, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down on the table. Inside, our house felt different, contaminated. I looked around at our wedding photos, our shared books, the couch where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies together, and felt like I was seeing someone else's life. I'm going to sleep in the guest room, I said. Evan, please, can't we talk about this? I need time to think. How much time? I looked at her, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, even with her makeup smeared and her hair disheveled. But she was a stranger now. Someone who could lie to my face for 6 months while planning her next betrayal. I don't know, maybe forever. I went upstairs and closed the guest room door behind me. Through the thin walls, I could hear Julia moving around our bedroom, our former bedroom, getting ready for bed. Normal sounds of a normal evening, except nothing would ever be normal again. I sat on the narrow guest bed and opened the folder Dr. Kim had given me. The evidence was overwhelming and humiliating. Text messages about weekend getaways, while I thought she was in client meetings. Photos of them together at restaurants I'd never heard of. Hotel receipts showing charges for champagne and room service. One text message thread made my stomach turn. David, can't wait to see you in Chicago. Booked the penthouse suite. Julia, Evan thinks I'm presenting to the Morrison board. If only he knew what kind of presentation I'm really giving. David, does he suspect anything? Julia, he's clueless. Asked me to bring him back some deep dish pizza. I'd eaten that pizza. Thanked her for thinking of me while she was away. Told her how much I missed her. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Mike. Hey, saw Julia looked rough at the grocery store today. Everything okay? I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. She's sick. We're dealing with it. It wasn't a lie, exactly. She was sick, morally, ethically sick. And we were definitely dealing with it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, listening to Julia crying in the next room and thinking about what came next. Divorce, obviously. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of her betrayal. I needed to know if David Kim was the only one, or if there had been others. Most of all, I needed to figure out how to rebuild my life from the ashes of my marriage. The next morning, Julia tried to act like nothing had happened. She made coffee, offered me breakfast, asked if I wanted her to call in sick to take care of me, as if I were the one who needed taking care of. I'm fine, I said, pouring coffee into a travel mug. I'm going to work. Evan, we need to talk about this. We need to figure out how to move forward. There is no we anymore, Julia. You made sure of that. I left her standing in our kitchen, still in her robe, looking lost and small. Part of me felt sorry for her. The larger part wanted to burn everything down. At my office, I'm an insurance adjuster for State Farm. I couldn't concentrate on anything. My colleague, Rick Thompson, noticed immediately. You look like hell, Bradford. What's wrong? Rick and I had been friends since college. He was the best man at my wedding, godfather to the kids Julia and I had always planned to have someday. If I could tell anyone, it was him. Julia's having an affair. Rick nearly choked on his coffee. Like, what? Are you sure? I told him everything, the hospital visit, Dr. Kim's revelation, the evidence folder. Rick listened without interruption, his face growing darker with each detail. Jesus Christ, Evan, 6 months? And with a married guy from her work? His wife's a doctor. She's the one who exposed it all. What are you going to do? Divorce her, obviously. But first, I want to know everything. I want to understand exactly how deep this betrayal goes. Rick leaned back in his chair. You sure about that? Sometimes ignorance is bliss. I'm sure. I need to know what I'm dealing with. That evening, while Julia was at her book club, or what she claimed was her book club, I went through our shared computer. She'd been careless, probably never expecting to get caught. Her email account was still logged in, and it didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Email threads with David going back 8 months. Not just affair planning, but intimate details about our marriage, our problems, our private moments. She'd shared everything with him. Our financial struggles when I was laid off 2 years ago, our fights about having children, even details about our sex life. In one email, she'd written, Evan's so predictable. Same routine every night, same moves in bed. Being with you reminds me what passion feels like. I had to stop reading and pour myself a whiskey. Then another. The worst part wasn't just the affair. It was how she'd turned our entire relationship into material for her secret romance. Every private moment, every vulnerability I'd shared had been entertainment for her and her lover. I printed everything. Bank statements showing charges at expensive restaurants on nights she'd claimed to be working late. Credit card receipts for lingerie I'd never seen her wear. Even a receipt for a weekend spa trip she'd supposedly taken with her sister Beth. I called Beth. Hey, Evan, how's Julia feeling? She looked terrible when she got back from Chicago. She's better. Hey, quick question. How was that spa weekend you two took last month? Silence, then. What spa weekend? The one Julia said you guys went to? Someplace in the mountains? Evan, I haven't been to a spa with Julia in years. Last month I was helping Mom clean out the garage. Julia knew that. Another lie. Another weekend with David while I thought she was bonding with her sister. Never mind, I said. I must have misunderstood. But Beth knew something was wrong. Is everything okay? You sound strange. Everything's fine. I'll talk to you later. I hung up and added Beth's statement to my growing file of evidence. Julia hadn't just betrayed me. She'd involved our families in her deception, using them as unwitting alibis for her affair. When she came home from book club, I was waiting in the living room with a glass of wine and a carefully neutral expression. How was book club? I asked. Good, we're reading Where the Crawdads Sing. Really beautiful story about a woman finding herself. Sounds perfect for you. She missed the sarcasm, settling into her usual spot on the couch. How was your day? You seemed upset this morning. I've been thinking about what you said, about David being different. She tensed. Evan, I want to understand. Help me understand what I did wrong. What I wasn't giving you that you needed to find somewhere else. It was a trap, and she walked right into it. It wasn't about you doing anything wrong, she said carefully. It was about me feeling invisible, like I was just going through the motions of life. David made me feel seen. When did it start? The feelings or the actual? Both. She looked down at her hands. The feelings started last winter, at the company Christmas party. You remember, you had the flu and couldn't come. I remembered. I'd been disappointed to miss it, but Julia had insisted I stay home and rest. David and I ended up talking all night about books, travel, dreams we'd had when we were younger. It felt like coming alive again. And the physical part? March, after the Morrison Industries retreat in Denver. Another business trip I'd helped her pack for. Another time I'd kissed her goodbye and wished her safe travels. Where? Does it matter? It matters to me. His hotel room, after the conference dinner. Was it planned? She shook her head. It just happened. We'd been drinking, talking about how unhappy we both were in our marriages. One thing led to another. But it didn't stop there. No. Her voice was barely a whisper. It didn't stop. I finished my wine and stood up. Thank you for being honest. What happens now? Now I decide whether our marriage is worth saving. It was another lie. I'd already decided. But I needed more time to gather information to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Julia had been planning and executing this betrayal for months. The least I could do was plan my response with equal care. That night, I called a divorce attorney. 2 days later, Julia's sister Beth called me at work. Evan, I can't stop thinking about our conversation. What's going on with Julia? I'd been dreading this call, but I'd also been expecting it. Beth was sharp, and she'd clearly picked up on the subtext of our earlier conversation. Why don't you ask her? I did. She said everything was fine, but she's been acting strange for months. Distant, secretive, and now you're asking about spa trips that never happened. I made a decision. Can you meet me for coffee after work? We met at a Starbucks downtown far from our usual neighborhood haunts. Beth took one look at my face and knew it was bad. She's having an affair, I said without preamble. Beth's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. What? I told her everything. The hospital visit, the STD, Dr. Kim's revelation, the evidence I'd found. Beth listened in growing horror, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations of disbelief. 6 months? She finally said. Jesus, Evan, I'm so sorry. Did you know? Suspect anything? No, but she thought for a moment. She has been different lately. More secretive about her phone, more concerned about her appearance. I thought maybe she was going through a midlife crisis or something. She used you as an alibi. That spa weekend that never happened? She was with him. Beth's face flushed with anger. She what? She dragged me into this? Unknowingly, but yes. That bitch. Beth rarely swore, so the vehemence in her voice surprised me. How dare she use our family to cover up her affair? What should I do, Beth? You know her better than anyone. Beth was quiet for a long time, stirring her coffee absently. Julia's always been selfish, she finally said. Even as kids, she'd take what she wanted and worry about the consequences later. But this is beyond selfish. This is cruel. Do you think she loves him? I think Julia loves the idea of him. The excitement, the secrecy, the drama. But real love? The kind that lasts? I don't think she's capable of it. That hurt more than I'd expected. She loved me once. Did she? Or did she love the idea of you? The stable husband, the nice house, the respectable life? I'd never thought about it that way, but Beth's words rang true. Julia had always been attracted to the idea of things more than the reality. She'd wanted to be married more than she'd wanted to be married to me specifically. I'm filing for divorce, I said. Good. You deserve better than this. Will you talk to her? Try to understand why? Beth shook her head. I don't want to understand why. I want to shake some sense into her, but I don't think that's possible anymore. That evening, I came home to find Julia in the kitchen, cooking my favorite meal, lasagna with garlic bread. The domestic scene would have been touching if I didn't know what lay underneath it. Smells good, I said, hanging up my jacket. I thought we could have a nice dinner, talk about things. What things? Our future. How to fix this. I sat down at the kitchen table and watched her bustle around, playing the role of devoted wife. Julia, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you love him? Her hand stilled on the oven door. What? David, do you love him? She turned around slowly, her face pale. Why are you asking me that? Because I need to know if this was just sex, or if you're planning to leave me for him. I'm not leaving you. I told you. I want to fix our marriage. That's not what I asked. She leaned against the counter, looking trapped. It's complicated. It's really not. Either you love him or you don't. I have feelings for him, yes, but I love you too. You can't love both of us, Julia. That's not how love works. Why not? People are capable of loving more than one person. I stared at her, amazed by her ability to rationalize anything. Is that what you tell yourself? That this is just you having a bigger heart than the rest of us? That's not, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're a selfish person who wanted to have her cake and eat it too. You wanted the stability of marriage and the excitement of an affair, and you didn't care who got hurt in the process. That's not fair. What's not fair is giving me an STD because you couldn't keep your legs closed. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't talk to me like that. Like what? Like someone who's been betrayed by the person they trusted most in the world? You're being cruel. I'm being honest. Maybe for the first time in this conversation. The timer on the oven went off, but neither of us moved to check the lasagna. We stood there in our kitchen, 12 years of marriage crumbling around us like old wallpaper. What do you want from me? Julia finally asked. What can I do to fix this? You can't fix this. You can't unfuck him, Julia. You can't take back 6 months of lies and betrayal. So that's it? You're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm accepting reality. And the reality is that you chose him over me every time you got on a plane to Chicago. Every time you lied about where you were. Every time you came home and kissed me with his taste still in your mouth. She started crying then, but I felt nothing. The numbness had spread through my entire body, protecting me from the worst of the pain. I never meant for this to happen, she sobbed. But you kept making it happen, for 6 months. I was confused, lost. I didn't know what I wanted. You knew exactly what you wanted. You wanted everything. Well, congratulations, you got it. And now you're going to lose it all. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her crying over her burnt lasagna, and went upstairs to pack a bag. I was done living in the wreckage of our marriage. It was time to start building something new. I moved into a furnished apartment across town that weekend. Julia begged me to stay, to try counseling, to give her another chance, but I was done listening to her promises. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once I showed my attorney the evidence Dr. Kim had provided, plus everything I'd found on our shared computer. Julia's lawyer advised her not to contest anything. The evidence of her affair was too overwhelming. But the real reckoning came 3 weeks later, when Julia's world started falling apart in ways she hadn't anticipated. It started with a phone call from Beth. Have you seen Julia lately? She asked. She looks terrible. I haven't seen her since I moved out. Why? I think the affair is over. She came to my house yesterday crying about how David won't return her calls. I felt a grim satisfaction. What happened? From what I can piece together, his wife, the doctor, made sure everyone at Morrison Industries found out about the affair. David got fired. His wife took their kids and moved back to California. And now he's blaming Julia for ruining his life. Good. Evan, she's really falling apart. I've never seen her like this. She made her choices, Beth. Now she gets to live with the consequences. But I was curious, so I did some investigating of my own. It turned out Dr. Sarah Kim had been very thorough in her revenge. She'd sent copies of all the evidence, text messages, photos, hotel receipts, to the HR department at Morrison Industries. Since Julia and David had been using company time and resources for their affair, both of them were facing disciplinary action. David had been fired immediately. Julia was on administrative leave pending a full investigation. I learned all this from Rick, whose cousin worked at Morrison Industries. Word is, she's probably going to lose her job too, Rick said over beers at our usual bar. Company has a strict policy about workplace relationships, especially when they involve falsifying travel expenses. She falsified travel expenses? According to my cousin, she was claiming business meals and entertainment for dinners with David. Technically, fraud. I should have felt sorry for her. Instead, I felt a cold satisfaction. Julia had always been so careful about her reputation, her career, her standing in the community. Now it was all crashing down because she couldn't resist the thrill of forbidden romance. The final blow came a month later. I was having dinner at Romano's, a nice Italian place downtown, when I saw them, Julia and David sitting at a corner table. But they weren't holding hands or gazing into each other's eyes like lovers. They were arguing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told the story. Julia was leaning forward, pleading. David was leaning back, shaking his head. When she reached across the table to touch his hand, he pulled away. Then David stood up, threw some money on the table, and walked out. Julia sat there alone for a moment, then buried her face in her hands. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Instead, I paid my check and left through the back exit. I didn't want to deal with the awkwardness of running into her, and I certainly didn't want to be the shoulder she cried on. But as I drove home to my small apartment, I realized something had shifted inside me. The anger was fading, replaced by something colder and more final: indifference. Julia had gambled our marriage on a fantasy, and she'd lost everything: her job, her lover, her family, her reputation. She was learning the hard way that actions have consequences, and that the people you hurt don't always forgive you. I, on the other hand, was starting to rebuild. I'd been promoted at work. Turned out I was much more focused when I wasn't worried about what my wife was doing behind my back. I'd started dating again, nothing serious yet, but it was nice to be with someone who actually wanted to be with me. Most importantly, I'd learned something about myself. I was stronger than I'd thought. Strong enough to walk away from a toxic situation, strong enough to start over, strong enough to demand better for myself. Julia thought she could have everything: the stable husband and the exciting lover, the respectable marriage and the thrilling affair. She'd been wrong. And now she had nothing. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in November. I signed the papers in my lawyer's office while Julia signed hers across town. We divided our assets according to the prenup she'd insisted on when we got married. Another irony, since it protected my retirement account from her claims. She got the house, but with the mortgage payments and her uncertain employment situation, I doubted she'd be able to keep it long. I got my freedom, my self-respect, and a hard-earned lesson about the difference between love and convenience. That evening, I raised a glass of good whiskey in my small but peaceful apartment, not to celebrate,